path into the Lost Valley. Is it the journey's end or the beginning of another journey?
So I'm hoping this section will be about analogies. Now, I may have mentioned before, I'm in Cyprus at the moment. I've got to go back to the UK, or I'm going back to the UK in a couple of days. But as I sit here, I'm looking out of the window at the sea and the sky, and the sun is going down. So let's have a look. I know what time the sun goes down. It's about 5:30 in the evening. I know in the next 20 minutes, the light is going to change pretty dramatically, and I've no idea what that'll do to this camera. So I'm sitting here as the sun goes down. Now, if we start thinking about analogies, when I say I'm sitting here as the sun goes down, I could use that as a way of saying the sun's going down on my life, perhaps. I've lived for 76 years. I've had a fantastic time. I've got various reasons to believe that my particular sun might set fairly soon. It could be hopefully weeks, maybe months. If I got really lucky, it could be years. But the point is, I want to capture this information. That's why I'm really committed to doing it. And that's why I want to do it before the sun sets, outside here today in Cyprus, and before the sun sets on my life. So using that kind of language, it's quite dramatic, isn't it? It hopefully communicates to you my feelings and my passion and my commitment to doing these videos. So in that respect, it is an analogy. Let's talk about what is an analogy. Each of us is, I'm going to use the word trapped in our own minds. My son Alexander thinks of us as cylinders of meat. Each person is a certain amount of meat. We're enclosed in our skins. Cylinder is full of liquids, and so on and so on. He tends to think biologically as well as mentally. I'm more in the mental space. So the challenge I face, and I think every individual faces, is we have our own thoughts. We have our own feelings. And if you're a social person, and I talked to you in the last video about forming, storming, norming, and performing, in that case, you're sitting there in a room and you've got ideas. You've got things you want to say. You want to be able to communicate them. And they're actually, these thoughts are buzzing around in your head. You can think of them as electrical signals, or you can think of them as the flow of chemistry, or whatever. However you think about them, they're your thoughts, they're your ideas, they're your beliefs. And you want to be able to communicate your thoughts and your feelings to other people. Now, the way that we do that, and we do it automatically because we've learned how to do it as children, is we use analogies. An analogy is a way of describing something and mapping onto something that you hope the other person is familiar with. So it's a way of taking people from the familiar to the new. And that's doing that, taking people from what they know now to what you want them to know that's a bit different or a lot different. That's all that is the basis of learning and teaching and so on. And the way to do that effectively is using analogies. You use them all the time without realizing. You would say, well, take the example I've just said. The sun is setting outside in Cyprus, and maybe kind of dramatically, the sun is setting on my life. I would stress, I don't think negatively about that. I think we all have to be practical about our life, how long it is, and we all have to do what we can to bring quality into it and make our lives count and make other people happy if we can, whilst we have the privilege of being alive. So this business of analogies, what I'd like you to do is start thinking about how you now, before we go into the detail of this, how do you communicate your thoughts and your beliefs to another person? If you watch people having a conversation, they'll be drawing comparisons between what they think and familiar situations. I'll give you an obvious example. A lot of people talk about gardening. They don't talk about gardening itself. They say, I think our company or our group ought to approach this in a gradual way. I think we need to sow the seeds of the ideas in our customers' mind. I think we need to give them more information to help those seeds to grow. And then I think perhaps we need to be patient as they grasp those ideas and the fruit of that plant starts to grow. And then if we do that effectively, and we've given them good seeds, and we've looked after them well, then eventually we will be able to harvest a very rich crop. And it will be well worth the investment of the time and the effort that we've spent working on that particular customer. Another approach you might say is, we haven't got time for that. We don't want to go around waiting for our business to grow. We need to get out there quickly. We've got to eat as a business or as individuals. We need to find places where there's already an opportunity, and we need to just go in there and pick that low-hanging fruit, for example. Low-hanging fruit is a very common term used in business for what are the easy opportunities. And it's those kinds of analogies that we use to communicate ideas. A very common one in the selling game is, we've got to go to war with this particular situation. We really need to get our forces in order. We need to make sure we've got the right resources. We need to plan where we're going to make our first approach. And we need to hit that area with an impact, get a beachhead and grow from there. And eventually we will conquer that market. So that's kind of an aggressive approach. So you've got two opposites there, or an opposite. You've got the farming and you've got the war, rape and pillage, if you like. So those are analogies, and they're different analogies, and you would use those in different ways. Now, I think what I'll do now is invite you to think, how do you communicate your ideas to another person? Are there any particular types of analogy that you like to use? I've written a couple down here. I'll give you a start. But if you really sit down and think about it, I reckon you might well be able to come up with 10 different types of analogy that you use pretty well all the time. So let me give you a couple to start with. Well, I've given you a couple. One's gardening, which you could easily talk about as farming. One's war. A couple more are sport. You know, we need to think about this. Well, I've used tennis pretty often, haven't I? If you think about the stuff I've been talking to you about conversation and questions, I've asking a question, I've said that's like serving a ball in a tennis match. And then answering is a bit like returning the ball. So that's another example. Let's think, what have we got? Oh, the weather. I mean, you know, we all use the weather pretty often. The situation that we're facing right now, it's a tricky situation. We're facing a difficult time economically. There's an economic storm coming, or we need to tighten our belts. Governments are always telling you you've got to tighten your belt one way or another and do more work and get less pay, as if there was an economic famine. Those 9 times out of 10, those aren't real. It's just a way of you accepting the fact that you're going to get less money. Other people almost undoubtedly will be getting more money, but it's a way that people can manage. That's the people in power can manage the. But that's a social question. Let's keep with the analogies. So what I'm inviting you to do, and I am going to pause this video pretty soon, is think about analogies. I'll give you a couple more just so we're on track together. Cooking. Cooking is a very common one about how you're going to approach a particular situation. We need to, having harvested our crop, we need to, I'm not sure that's as good a one as, I will tell you another one, relationships and love. What's love like? How do we describe a relationship? How do we describe approaching someone? Do you know what? This isn't working. The sun's setting. I think I'm going to pause the whole thing and I'm going to have another go tomorrow morning because it is a fabulously rich topic. I might just leave this kind of rubbish stuff here for you to think about, but maybe together we can open up this particular magic box of analogies that's there because we all use them all the time. Maybe the right way to approach this is over the next day or so, when you're talking to someone and trying to share an idea with them, and it may be an idea you're trying to share, or it may be a feeling that you're trying to share, and you'll use an analogy. And you could jot that down on maybe on a little bit of paper, and together we can look at this again and see just what kind of analogies you like to use, when you use them, how you use them. Again, I'm going to pause because the sun really is setting. Cheers.